Our next guest is a self-described biblical conservative who was elected to Congress in 2018, in part due to his strong pro-life and pro-family values. Congressman Bob Good joins me now to discuss why the GOP must fight the bill codifying the redefinition of marriage into federal law. He serves on the House Committee on Education and Labor, the House Budget Committee, and he represents the 5th District of Virginia. Congressman Good, welcome back to Washington Watch.
Great to be with you, Joseph. Thanks for having me again.
Thank you for your time. Tell us, why do you think that repealing DOMA has become such a priority issue for the Democrats so suddenly?
It's just a continuation, as you know, and the war on our foundational principles, our Judeo-Christian principles upon which our nation was founded, our respect for religious freedom, our respect for the importance of the family, the importance of biblical principles. You know, I have said often in speeches and interviews and even on the House floor that almost everything that plagues our culture is a failure to follow God's design for marriage, God's design for morality, and God's design for the family. And so the left, of course, doesn't believe that. And you see this relentless assault for these last 60 years on the foundations that uphold who we are as a nation. And you see that certainly with marriage. And, you know, it has served us for 5,000 years, the institution of marriage, the way that God defined it. And I was asked on the Capitol steps just yesterday as I was leaving the vote, you know, why did I have the view that I have on marriage? I said, I accept God's definition of marriage. He knew what he was doing when he created and ordained the institution, and that's good enough for me.
Well, I think that's a really good answer, and this does go back to Genesis chapter 3 and the question that was asked when sin entered the world: did God really say? And since then, we have all been discussing whether God actually knows what he's talking about or whether we are smarter than him. But as you know, this is not just a one-party issue. 47 members of the Republican House caucus voted for this. How is that affecting your caucus? Tell us about the conversations that you've been having. What do you think this means going forward?
Well, I was very disappointed that any Republicans would vote for this bill. And I was disappointed to see that 47 of my colleagues did. I mean, you can look at it and say, well, 75% of us voted against it, but we ought to have been at 100% as a Republican caucus. We ought to stand boldly and unashamedly for biblical principles, for our foundational Judeo-Christian principles, for the importance of the family. And we ought to resist efforts to redefine the family. You know, appeasement never works with the left. And, you know, you look back to the 1970s when this became an issue, when the gay rights issue began to emerge. And there was predictions, as you know, Joseph, on where this would take us, that it would be a slippery slope and a descent into the abyss, if you will, morally. And we've seen that happen now, where the Democrat Party is about everything transgender, everything sexual orientation, what they're trying to do in our schools, what they're trying to do with our military, how they want to define everything in those terms and make every issue about that. And so they will not be appeased. And we cannot think that, you know, that appeasement works. We need to stand on truth. We need to stand on principle and do so unashamedly and unapologetically.
You know, Congressman, your colleague, Congressman Dan Bishop, was with us earlier in the show, and we discussed how the slippery slope of same-sex marriage that was being debated in 2008 to 2012 has turned out to be much slipperier than anyone dared to predict at the time. And we really have seen that effect. But another one of your colleagues, Chip Roy, seemed to indicate that he thinks it's a good thing that this is now being debated in Congress rather than the Supreme Court. Let's go ahead and play clip 5, and then I want you to respond to that.
Just thank my colleagues for recognizing the importance of the democratic process, that we're here as the people's representatives having a debate about policy rather than looking to the Supreme Court to make policy. Suddenly now that the court doesn't issue an opinion that my colleagues favor.
Congressman Good, what's your response?
Well, what was one of the things that was so wrong with the Obergefell decision, in addition to my belief, of course, again, strongly in the principles of biblical marriage, but the court was doing for the left what they could not do through a legislative process. Even in states like California, they couldn't pass measures to redefine marriage, and they certainly couldn't in my home state here in Virginia. And so you had the court overreaching, of course, in 2015 and making law from the bench, stripping away the constitutional process and stripping away from the people's representatives the constitutional authority and the constitutional responsibility to make law. And so that's what was wrong with that decision, in addition to me disagreeing with the morality of it. but it was the court overstepping its bounds. And I'm thankful that we had an overturning of the most monumental, devastating, catastrophic decision in the history of the United States with the Roe v. Wade decision. And thankfully, the only decision that's ever cost 63 million lives has finally been overturned. But it's given us the opportunity as legislators, and we need to step up to the plate as legislators and fight to eliminate all abortion in this country.
If there is a silver lining in all of this, I think it is that this is actually being debated in the place it should be debated. And the interference from the Supreme Court took this away from our elected officials for a long time. And I think it's progress that elected officials feel like they have to be involved. But Congressman Good, last question. How do you think this is going to play out in the Senate in about 30 seconds?
I'm very fearful that the Senate is going to supply the 10 votes. I'm hearing behind the scenes that they will have 10 votes for it. I certainly hope that's not the case. We need to be strong as conservatives and message against that, put as much pressure as we can publicly, and I hope they'll hear from their constituents accordingly.
And we hope they will as well. And we're going to tell them how to do that in just a moment. But Congressman Good, thank you so much for your time, your courage, and leadership as always.
Thank you, Joseph. God bless you.